and welcome to the 6 o'clock segment of World Nightly News. I'm Morgan Johnson, and tonight we will be talking about Latin America from 1945 to today. First up is reporter Isabel Copeland, who will be covering the trends in Latin America. Isabel?
The United States has long played a major role in Latin America. The Latin nations were dependent on the U.S., and this caused their economies to remain fragile. American investors pressured the U.S. government to prevent political and social change in Latin America, even if it meant backing dictators. Then, in 1950, a new president of Guatemala, Jacobo Arbenz, began a land reform program and seized him the United Fruit property, which was one of the most influential American businesses in Latin America. Arbenz was overthrown in 1954 because his actions were thought to be linked to communist movements. In 1948, the Organization of American States, or the OAS, was formed to end military action by one state in the affairs of another. But American involvement continued due to the fear that poverty in these countries made them vulnerable to communist takeover. However, recurring economic crisis actually led to a demand for democracy because other leaders didn't want to deal with debt. Continuing rural poverty led to drug trade. People in Bolivia, Peru, and Colombia grew coca and opium to make a living. They supplied drug lords who fed the world's cocaine and heroin demands. It was difficult for the government to suppress the drug industry because in some cases, the judges who attempted to sentence a drug criminal was assassinated. Without a strong economy and a more even distribution of wealth to all citizens, Peru returned to an authoritarian system.
Thank you, Isabel. Moving forward, reporter Nicole Vincent has some interesting information on the Society of Latin America.
Thank you, Morgan. Latin America's economic problems are worsening by dramatic growth in population. Mexico's population grew from 47 million to more than 90 million since 1940. Mexico has become a megacity. Normal infrastructures like housing, plumbing, water supply, and schooling have nearly become non-existent in the suburbs. A better life died quickly for those moving from the countryside to Rio de Janeiro. Migration has increased dramatically in especially Brazil, Chile, and Venezuela. Land-holding urban elites own large estates and businesses while the poor struggle to survive. Women are moving into new jobs in industry, law, and medicine. Latin Americans look to writers and artists to express their hopes and criticisms of government and society. One of the best, Colombian writer Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who was inspired by Franz Kafka, wrote 100 Years in Solitude. He suggested that whether something is fantasy or fact is dependent on the person's perspective.
Thanks, Nicole. Reporter Isabella Nunez comes now with insight from other neighboring countries. Isabella?
New reforms were made in 1968 by the two presidents Luis Echeverria and José López Portillo. They opened the idea of a new political parties and more freedom of debate in the press on college campuses. However, economic problems made it difficult for democratic reform to go forward. As oil reserves were discovered in the 1970s, governments became more dependent on the oil sales. Oil sales dropped in the 80s, so Mexico was not able to make its payments to foreign debt. Central America's economy depends on the export of bananas, coffee, and cotton. Prices of the products fluctuate often, which creates severe economic problems. A civil war erupted in El Salvador, which resulted in the death of at least 75,000. The Somoza family reigned in Nicaragua for about 42 years, which the U.S. supported. The Somozas used their position to enrich themselves rather than promoting social programs to benefit citizens. Panama gained its independence in 1903 when it broke away from Colombia with help from the U.S. Back to you, Morgan.
Our last report is covered by Maddie Sowie, who introduces the presidency and governments of Chile and Argentina. Off to you, Maddie.
Thank you, Morgan. Juan Perón had won over the workers and was elected president in 1946. Parallel to Hitler's brown shirts, Perón's regime was authoritarian. The humiliating defeat of Argentina's Falkland Islands by Great Britain discredited the military and opened the door to civilian trade. Salvador Allende was elected president of Chile in 1970, and his policies were very unpopular. General Augusto Pinochet helped move the government, and in September of 1973, his military forces seized the palace and killed Allende. Pinochet's regime had people arrested and some were never seen again. This was called the desaparecidos, or the disappeared.
Thanks, Maddie. Next, reporting live from... Wait, what? Breaking news? It looks like we have breaking news from our last reporter. Back to you, Maddie.
That's right, Morgan. As you probably know, Colombia supplies the majority of cocaine sold in the U.S., but the government is starting an aerial eradication to prevent the drugs from getting to the U.S.
That concludes our 6 o'clock World Nightly News. Join us again at 9, 10, or 11. I'm Morgan Johnson. Good night.
Be me tripping over something.
If I just throw water and then Ew.
Okay, I got this.
Okay,
Your hand's covering it.
American investors pressured the U.S. government to prevent. Okay, that is right. It sounds wrong.
The way you say samosa.
I don't like that. Depends on the person's perspective.